Okay, so I just wrote up my write out for the confused single, which is in Re 7. Um, and in doing so, something kind of jumped out at me, which is that my experience um, is not the same as you would expect from a younger person. It's not the same as um, the stereotypes attached to millennials, right? Or the ideas of schooling that you see attached to millennials, right? So there's this kind of understanding, and even the left acknowledges this as well, is that and takes credit for it, which is that the scholastic system has become very left wing. And here I am arguing that my experience in school was tarnished by the conservative nature of the institutions, and that the um, core of the social issues that I've been having throughout my life, the reasons to transition, the reasons I'm on disability, all of it kind of stem from um, uh, trauma experienced in childhood as a consequence of the conservative nature of the school system. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not a millennial, right? And it upholds that. Upholds the narrative that I've been presenting, right? If you're trying to understand me as just another millennial, or as a representative of the millennials, or whatever else, you're going to read that and you're going to say, geez, this doesn't have anything to do with what we associate with millennials. Does that mean that what we think about millennials is wrong? No. What it means is that I'm not a millennial. And I've never claimed to be a millennial. In fact, I've repeatedly rejected the claim. I'm rejecting the claim right now. Again, I don't have life experiences that can be associated with that generation. I know that I look 10 or 15 years younger than I am, but I am not of it. I am not of that generation. I am of my own age. I have experiences of my own age. I have opinions of my own age. I can only continue to explain why I'm not a millennial, and hope it eventually gets acknowledged. That said, I will say that growing up in the squeeze like this, I was born in 1981, so I'm very much of Gen X. I very much identify as Gen X, but I'm very much at the end of it as well, right? And growing up in that squeeze has kind of taken away the present. So when I was a teen in the 90s, it seemed like I had the choice to exaggerate the length of my childhood or end up as going, as 15 going on 27, which is what I ended up doing, right? And was particularly abrasive given the arrested development I was coming out of. I never really felt like I had the option of being a teenager, and that was life, Like I remember being 15 and like I had the choice of like of still being 10 years old, and the truth is that a lot of my friends were still 10 years old or mentally 10 years old at the age of 15, because I mean the entire culture, the society, the media, everything was trying to break the generations up in that sense, right? So there was this huge media push for like cartoons um, and whatnot. Um, and it's true, a lot of people that I knew at the age of 15, they were still watching cartoons, right? Like Saturday morning cartoons at the age of 15. And I couldn't deal with that. Like I didn't have. I mean, I didn't watch Saturday morning cartoons when I was 10, right? um, like so and I was very well aware that there was sort of this extreme level of immaturity around me. um, I was more interested in kind of aligning myself with people that were 10, 15 years older than me, right? Which meant the whole alternative rock thing and everything else, right? And it seemed like that was the choice I had. I could be Gen Y or a millennial and still, act like a child up to the age of 20. Or I could skip the whole teenage thing and just jump to being a 20 something, right? And then when I was in my 20s, I kind of had the same issue, right? Because then all of a sudden, the whole millennial culture had caught up, right? And the millennials were going through their teens, and there was this big media push, right? And the culture and everything else for them to go through that period, right? And they took over, right? And again, a lot of people that I knew that were around me, and this is when I really kind of lost touch, was when I couldn't deal with it anymore, right? It's like when I'm 26 years old and my friends are listening to music that's geared towards 12-year-olds. That's when things broke, right? But I mean, I did kind of, I dated when I was in my early 20s. I dated a girl that was 4 years younger than me. We met a few months after she turned 18. So, and she was more of a millennial, right? So, I mean, I kind of lived that for a few years, right? But broadly speaking, most of my 20s were spent separating myself from the people around me, as I was aging faster than they were, right? So I did end up making both choices in sequence, right? But it was like, acting my age made me feel old. And so, but at the same time, there wasn't really that option to act my age. Most people my age were stuck in the arrested development, right? They're still acting like teenagers, in their into their late 20s. And I couldn't deal with it, right? What I wanted was, to be able to act like I'm 20. But I didn't have that. I didn't feel like the society was going to give me that choice. I could act like I'm 15 or I could act like I'm 35. And like I say, I did both. And my 30s have been kind of the same thing, right? Now that I'm, once I got into my 30s, the millennials were living in their 20s, right? And then all of a sudden I could do the things that I wanted to do in my 20s, like protest. I mean, I did some protesting in my 20s, but it was these were Gen X protests, like anti-free trade protests, right? And there was that kind of gap that came in. Actually, that's not true. I wasn't in my 20s. I was in my teens. So this is actually upholding what I'm saying, right? Because the gap that hit at 9/11. That's when that kind of movement kind of stopped, right? When the Gen X movement kind of scattered, not completely. I mean, and I did go to some free trade protests in the early 2000s as well, but most of that was done like when I was a teenager, kind of thing. And when I was living through my 20s, there was no protest movement. I came back during Occupy, and I turned 30 that year, right? So, and I was protesting with people that were younger than me, people that were in their 20s, right? There were some people that were about my age as well, but most of them were younger. And so I ended up living my 20s and my 30s, but then again, most of the time since then, I've been living a lifestyle that's more, reflective of somebody that is older, somebody in their 40s even. I wake up early in the morning. I spend a lot of time by myself. I'm visibly aging in my lifestyle, right? I do live like an old person, and that's okay. I'm not. I kind of would like to, be kind of more my age, but there's so few of us, right? And like I say, the bulk of people my age got stuck in this millennial culture like 25 years ago. They watched cartoons on Saturday mornings until they were 20, and then they lived like teenagers until they were 30, and now they're only living like 20 somethings now, which is something I feel I'm beyond, right? And looking forward, like, am I going to live my 30s when I'm 40? What does it mean to be 30? Well, that's supposed to be when, when you start buying property and having kids and stuff. Is that going to happen then? I don't think so. Maybe. I hope not, because then I'll be jumping to my 50s at 45. I'll be, I'll be a, I'll be a grandma without being a mother first, right? But such is the nature of the generational cusp. And as of right now, I am. I'm 35 years old with the life experiences of a 45-year-old. I'm 35 going on 47, and I'm happy with it. I don't want to be your stupid millennial. I'm an angry, bitter Gen Xer, and I'm absolutely happy about it.